Shout for joy. Be glad and exult with all your heart. Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. Come on, get happy. Well, someone might say, how can you get that happy and rejoice always in a world like we live in today? Or even more devastatingly, they might say, how can I be happy in the world that I live in, with what I struggle with, or my loved ones, in which there's a lot going on, and some of it's really not very good, and I'm worried about a lot of things. How can you tell me to rejoice always? Good question, isn't it? In order to do that, we know that we need to find out some reason why we should in the first place. Well, what would cause us to rejoice in the situation that we're in right now? Well, the first reading suggests a couple things. One, rejoice because the judgment of the Lord has been removed from you. We don't have to be thinking that God's a big black cloud hanging over us, ready to dump on us as soon as we do something wrong. The judgment's been removed. He's not out to get us. He's out to save us. He always was. So, that's the first thing. Rejoice always because the judgment of God has been removed. And secondly, he says, because the Lord is already in your midst. God is already among us. Perhaps we just don't realize it, but he's there. You don't have to wait until we're good enough for God to come to us. He's there now. So that's what there is to rejoice about. So how do you go about doing it? I'll suggest two things. One is to do our inner work. What do I mean by inner work? It can mean a lot of things. This is what I mean today. Inner work means that we work on what's going on inside of us. For example, it says that the judgment of God has been removed from you. Well, to trust in that God. Okay, God's judgment has been removed from me, but the thing is that too often we don't remove that judgment from ourselves. Sometimes things that we were told, perhaps in our childhood by our parents or by friends or whomever, it said, you're no good, you never amount to anything, you're a big loser, that you're never going to go anywhere. You're no good, you're not perfect, you're not good. And we carry that judgment around inside the rest of our life, unless we do our inner work. And remind ourselves that we are all, each one of us, made in the image of likeness of God, and that image and likeness, although it might be a little tarnished here and there, it's still in there. It's at the basis of who we are. That inner likeness to God is still there. And we don't have to carry around those judgments of other people. That's part of our inner work. To refuse that. And in the midst of doing that, not to hang around people who tell us we're no good. To avoid them as much as you can. Sometimes it's in our families. You know how families can be. Avoid them as much as you can. Or sometimes I've been with people and things get negative and they go, let's change the subject here. It's not going to a good place. Okay. Remove the inner judgment. Trust in God. That's one thing, one part of the inner work. Another part is in the gospel. It says, be satisfied with what you have. That doesn't mean that we can't ask or work for a more of a just wage. It means don't be greedy and the kinds of things that come from being greedy. Be satisfied with what you have. And if we look around, it's like, we've got enough to be happy right now. And if we're going to say, well, I can't be happy unless I get something more like this thing over here, it's like, okay, it's your choice. You don't want to be happy until you get that? You're not going to be. Are we? How about being grateful for what we have and saying, there's so much that I have in my life I don't need like half the world does. There's plenty here. Be satisfied with what you have. And it's a reason to be joyful. And the third thing is to pray. To make some space for God in our lives every day. I don't care how we do it. There are lots of ways to do it. But make some space for God in our life every day so that we can remember that He is in our midst. He hasn't set us out here on our own to try to make it if we poor miserable creatures can. No, He's already here. So that prayer can help us. And from time to time, we might have even a more significant experience of God. You can come anywhere. You can come in the Adoration Chapel. You can come in the quiet of our homes or in the corner that we pray in. You can come out when we're out with people. Pray. Keep an open heart to God. That's part of the inner work so that we can live more joyful lives. And the other part is the outer work. 3 times in the gospel, John the Baptist is asked this question. Well, what are we to do? Good question, isn't it? So Jesus says, if you have 2 cloaks, give one to another, and also feed those who are hungry. That will bring some joy to your heart. Picks up on something that's other places in the Bible, like the prophet Isaiah, where it says, lavish food on the hungry and satisfy the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom become like midday. The Lord will guide you always and satisfy your thirst in parched places, will give strength to your bones. We feed the hungry and satisfy the afflicted. We've got that giving tree back there, and I've heard from several different sources. People who have gone back there on the giving tree come back and say, it's such a joy to give to somebody in need. We give gifts at Christmas all the time, and that's a good thing to do to our families and that's all great. I suggest that, or suspect that the majority of it we don't need. But when someone gives something to someone who needs, there's a different kind of joy with that, isn't there? Somebody told me, I went back there and I thought, I'll just see what's back there. I picked off a thing that says 10-year-old wants a stocking cap and gloves. And he said, I can do that. So he looked at a couple more, so he ended up taking a bunch of them. And he said, it feels so good to give to somebody who needs something. Anyway, some people have brought their gifts to the office, and some of them, one of them had tears in her eyes. I am glad to give this. There's joy in that, to give to those who are in need. And we're in charge of that. What can I do? Give to those in need. And another thing we can give is a good word. We might have some criticism about other people, and it might be very accurate. But does it help? If I just criticize them a little bit more, then they're going to get better, right? No, then they're going to feel worse about themselves and less able to do what they need to do. How about speaking good things? Who profits from me telling them that they're dumb? You ever done that? How can you be so dumb? Oh, thanks. That helps a lot. What positive thing can we think of to say to somebody else? What encouraging thing can we think of to support somebody else? How can we uplift somebody else by our words? Sometimes in the confessional, I'll say this for penance. I say, I want you to go and speak 2 positive, encouraging, uplifting things to somebody else. And if you do that, how do you think that person will feel? And they say, I think they'd feel pretty good. And I'd say, and how do you think you'd feel? I always say, I'd feel good too. Better than what I feel now. What do you know about that? What are we to do? How about positive, complimentary, encouraging, uplifting words that can help? And everybody can do something. When I was in another parish in southern Indiana called St. Joe Hill was the name of the parish, there was these two old guys, I'll call them Albert and Herbert. Albert was married, and then Herbert was a bachelor all his life. Well, Albert's wife died, and so he moved in with his brother, and they had, and they were all retired and couldn't get around very well. But they had a house on Highway 60. It was coming west off 65 from Louisville, about 10, 15 minutes north of Louisville. And Highway 60 went this way, then Highway 111 went that way, and their house was right square in that split right there. And people who lived in that area, a lot of them worked in downtown Louisville, were coming there after a real hard day. And so Albert and Herbert would sit out on the porch and do this. Sometimes people would wave back. Sometimes people would flick their lights. Sometimes they didn't do anything and just drove by. Maybe they didn't see them, who knows? But that's what they did. Well, Herbert died first, and then Albert died later. And when Albert died, I was did the funeral. And at the funeral, the family read a letter from a lady. She said, I didn't know Albert or Herbert. I've never met them. I found out their name. I want to tell you, I worked in downtown Louisville. It was a stressful job. When I would see them out there on the porch waving at me, it just reminded me that there's still joy in life. Something else. There's a life going on out here. It uplifted my heart and changed my life. And it made Albert and Herbert feel good too. They're doing something. Somebody else. Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again, rejoice. To get there, make it more of a reality, we need to do our inner work. And we need to do our outer work. If we do that, and as we do that, we will discover the God who is in our midst and be able to celebrate that presence when Christmas comes.